When you're ready, I'll say. Okay. Okay, so we are going to enter into our work session. It is February the 7th, 2024, 7:36 p.m. And this work session is, we're going to talk about confidentiality concerns.
Okay, Mayor, thank you. And once staff talks a little bit, this is really going to be a discussion amongst yourselves. But we recently had two very quick instances of concerns from a confidentiality perspective. And so I want to just explain as a reminder which those two concerns. And then also remind council, since this is a work session, since one of them does deal from a personnel perspective, we need to make sure that we still maintain that confidentiality in our language as we talk tonight and not use names, positions, that type of thing. As we know, we had an individual who downloaded the executive session as it related to those meetings council was having with department heads. And it took us a while, but we were able to identify the individual. Once we knew the individual and the circumstances surrounding it, at that point, police realized that they needed to close their case because certain parts of it could not be proven, and that it really was a personnel issue, which then we handled internally from a confidential perspective. Since we knew and we're able to bring closure to that, we knew that the public was also following that fairly closely. And so we created a press announcement that we were planning to share with the public and in the news media that would share that we had identified it, that we can close this out. It's a personnel matter, kind of is the point of what the press release was. The city attorney sent an email to city council that had that press release, and it was mid-morning indicating that we were going to release that press release at 1 o'clock. Given the scrutiny that had been there from the public, and if one of you guys would get a call or something like that, we wanted a few hours time for council to know that that was coming out. Not all of you guys are checking your email, so we wanted there to be a few hours to have a lead time for council to have that. So the first breach isn't necessarily the worst, but it does go against group expectations, I would say, in that I would say within an hour of the city attorney sending that email, the city attorney and myself were receiving an email from the news media indicating they had heard that we're getting ready to do a press release or a news conference at 1 o'clock. So that is concerning, because what is the point of us trying to give you a heads up if it's then being sent to the news media? It makes it seem maybe as if the news media can't trust us type of situation. Just it's not good type of thing. But obviously the type of information that was leaked isn't anything that was critical. It was just that this is coming type of situation. The second breach we had the very same day is in the city attorney's email to you, which was labeled confidential and privileged because it did contain items related to the personnel, did identify the individual who had downloaded that. And this is where the more serious breach comes, in that after the press release hits, the news is kind of circulating in the public, and then it comes to our attention that the sheriff's office knows who the individual was. So very quickly, that same day, they're able to connect with someone in order to learn the identity of that individual, which was in an email labeled confidential and privileged from your city attorney. And so that's a much more serious breach from a confidentiality perspective. So I wanted to provide a little bit of an overview. Obviously, city attorney can speak to himself, but I will tell you, when we're having these types of breaches, it really makes us as staff need to think twice on what we're going to be sharing. By no means do we want to hurt our relationship with the media and make them feel as if we're withholding information. And, you know, if they're thinking they need an inside person to be giving them the idea of what's going on, that's not good from a relationship perspective. And if we have personnel confidential items, and potential leaks there. Clearly, that's not good, and it's going to dampen what we are going to tell you. We're really going to have to be, okay, what is the need to know? And what is the details that aren't need to know? And I'm not sure that's what council wants either, type of thing. And so before I hand out our policy, so council can know what you already have in your policy, I want to let the city attorney say any words he may have as well.
Thank you, Heather. I just wanted to give a little bit of background on the nature of privileges and confidentiality, in particular, because we have a couple new council members on, and also it's been a while since we've thought about this as a group in council. And as you know, in general, government, and in particular, the city of Alamosa, is dedicated to transparency. We think transparency is a vital value and a vital way that the city interacts with itself and with its citizens. And so we've also got the Open Records Act, and we've got the Open Meetings Act. So there's a state commitment to transparency. There's a city of Alamosa strong commitment to transparency. There are situations, though, that are confidential and that are privileged. And some of those are privileged by law, such as the personnel discussions. Some of them are privileged by choice. And so the privileged by choice kind of situations in particular are attorney-client privilege and executive session privilege. Those are both, there are more, but those two are the kind of the ones that we're talking about that bubbled up most recently. That's a privilege. That privilege of confidential information is a privilege that is held by council as a body. So, for instance, with respect to attorney-client privilege, I can't waive that privilege. When I have conversations with you guys, that's privileged conversations. I can't talk about it. You can't talk about it. You can talk about it if, as a council, you vote to waive that privilege for whatever purpose. So the privilege can be waived, but the decision to do it is a decision of the body. It's not a decision of any individual council member. And it's the same thing with your executive session privilege. That's a privilege that can be waived. You could make public what was discussed in executive session. But again, that's a decision that the body as a whole has to make. That's not a decision that any participant in that executive session can make on his or her own behalf. So just, in summary, yes, transparency, very important. But in those situations where there is a privilege, people who are part of those privileged conversations expect that privilege to be maintained unless and until the council, the body holding the privilege, decides to waive it for whatever reason. So sort of the background of how those privileges arise. And I think Heather was getting ready to talk about how you guys have addressed those kind of privileges and confidentiality in your code of conduct. And then we have, I don't know what the plan is, but we have some other background material. There's a very good article that was put out by the Council of Western Cities or something like that, that provides a background on the existence of executive sessions, why it's important to have them in certain instances, even though the background is transparency, and why maintaining the confidentiality of those sessions is so important. So do you want to pass these both out now, or?
Sure, if you want to pass that out and I'll talk. What I handed out is just 2 pages from council's policy manual. So the first page is the code of
In one
conduct.
second,
Oh,
Ms.
sorry.
Sanchez, is Zoom still working or is it not working? Okay, it is. All right, good. Thank you.
Okay. So the first page is the code of conduct. And there is a bullet line that talks about maintaining confidentiality. Now, it's specific to material discussed during executive sessions. Information presented or discussed in executive sessions should not be shared with anyone at any time. I would argue getting confidential privileged information from your city attorney is the same as an executive session. It's slightly different, but as far as confidentiality expectations for code of conduct, I would think that that would be very similar. So that's the area under code of conduct. So this is where council is setting up its expectations for its members on how to behave and those types of things. Then there's some sections on the conduct with the public, conduct with staff, conduct with board. So I didn't do those because it's not relevant for tonight's conversation. But a lot of times I get counsel or questions from counsel on, well, what if someone's not following what they're supposed to be following, or if they're violating what we feel or the code of conduct. So then I did copy on the second page, which is violations. And this is something that I'm not sure council has really ever exercise this muscle type of situation. So essentially what the process should be, it says, council members who intentionally and repeatedly do not follow proper conduct may be reprimanded or formally censored by the council and lose committee assignments. Serious infractions could lead to other sanctions as deemed appropriate by council. And then the process it kind of envisions is that if you feel like there's been an infraction, the expectation, depending on the infraction, is that you as a council member would talk to the other council member that you have that concern with. Depending on how that conversation goes, and again, the level of the infraction, if you feel like that conversation was positive, the behavior's not going to happen again, that's simply where it could end type of thing. If it was a bigger deal, then obviously you might still want to talk to the person, but then bring it to the mayor's attention. And then the mayor can work on, does it need to be addressed in a public meeting or not, that type of situation. If the council member has that conversation, feels like it doesn't go very well, the next step is to talk to the mayor, and then for the mayor to also talk to the offending council member. So there's just some steps, but the biggest point is the communication type of situation. And I think regardless of what we're discussing tonight, just going forward, being comfortable having that hard conversation when you feel like maybe a council member is doing something that's pushing up against something you feel, is having those conversations and interacting with each other. Not always easy, but probably something to try to work on. It talks about like if it's outside observed behaviors, you guys can create people who would do an investigation, few things like that. But then at the end, if it's very serious, you guys can bring it in the public meeting, talk about the violation and then what the recommended sanctions are type of situation. And so that's what's currently in city council policy. That's all I have from a presentation perspective, but we're here to obviously answer any questions.
Sure. I think we have some council members who would like to make some comments tonight in regards to the breach. So I'm just going to recognize the mics as they come on. Councilor Vihil.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm glad that we're talking about this. And I guess just a question on that for city manager or Eric is that breach of that first email that was sent out that we're gonna do a press release at 1 o'clock, that was sent about 9:30. Was that sent to all city councilors and staff or just city council?
So the city attorney's email was sent only to city council.
Okay,
What I did though, is I took his email, I took out the name of the individual.
Yep.
And.
No, I think that's a different one. So I believe
Um,
Mr. Vihil's talking about the press release one. It didn't have any names in it.
Your email had the press release attached and then it said who the person was.
Oh, okay.
So,
That's why things go in writing, because you don't remember.
okay. So I took the city attorney's email, I took out the name of the individual, but it had the press release and I forwarded that to just department heads. So they knew, department heads knew that there was a press release getting ready to come out, but they did not know the name of the individual.
right.
Yes.
Okay, so then this comment, because we don't know who leaked that first email to the paper that we were going to have a press release at 1 o'clock. And I'm really bothered by that. It's someone in this room, okay? And I'm just upset because this is not how things have been. I've been up here for 11 years. I feel like I might be one of the veteran counselors up here. It's never been this way. I feel like the person who leaked it wants to see us burn, wants to see things chaos, wants to see us mess up, okay? And maybe I don't know, find some joy in our mishaps. And it's not to say that it was going to be withheld from the public, withheld from the paper. It was going to come out at 1 o'clock. There was 3 or 4 hours for that to happen. No one is withholding any information. I look at ourselves as a team, especially up here. We are a team. And if you can't, I can only speak by myself, from my own personal perspective. We are a team. We do things together. And if you're the one who's leaking information, I think you're not being a good teammate. And it bothers me.
Thank you, Counselor Yun V. Hill. Any other comments? So I don't see it. Were you about to push your mic? Go ahead.
Not about what's currently being discussed, Mayor.
Okay, all right. So any other comments on the confidentiality part? So I was very disappointed. And it takes a lot to get me angry, but I was angry and frustrated and really saddened that we had someone in our organization breach the situation, which should have remained confidential. I immediately reached out to city attorney and also Ms. Sanchez to see what we can do to set a strong message that this won't be tolerated. So I did some research to see what some possible things that we can do. And there is maybe one thing we can do, and I have to wait for the city attorney's guidance on this, but to send a strong message to all of us on here, to have some type of fine if someone were to violate this in the future. The dollar amount that I would propose would be at least $600. If you're caught violating this policy, just to send a message, and also to have that person we'll bring that up in a public meeting. Because if we don't have trust, we don't have anything. If a person cannot trust that we can talk in private and not have information released to the public, then a lot of people are not going to feel comfortable with sharing information with the team that we need to make a positive difference. So I'm hoping that this is the very last time, because I can tell you this without a shadow of a doubt. If someone breaches it the next time and I find out about it, everybody's going to know about it. Trust me on this. Okay, so city attorney, if you could share with us if that is an option for us to move forward with trying to propose some type of fine if a person is caught, and how would we go about implementing such strategy?
It is, Mayor. I think if you were wanting to do that, it would be appropriate, or you could either put it in your policy manual in the section on violations, or you could just have a separate standalone policy that deals with it. But it would be essentially a policy that council would adopt that would say, you know, violation of the any of the confidentiality or privileges held by council may be subject to a censure, well, it already is subject to a censure in your policy, or a fine. The policy as it exists says other sanctions as deemed appropriate by council, and certainly that there would be, you as a body govern yourselves. And so your policies, your rules and regulations about how you govern yourselves can be pretty much whatever you want them to be.
I would also recommend if that's something that council's entertaining from a modification to your policy, that we also, under the code of conduct, expand the language to where it's not just an executive session from a confidentiality perspective, that it also includes any information sent from the city attorney that's labeled confidential and privileged. Because while I think it's in the same level type of thing, it's clearly not the exact language. So I would say if we're gonna be modifying the policy, we also, make that clarification as well.
Okay, all right. Do we need any consensus or anything, or give staff guidance on moving forward from council? Because I don't want this to be all about me and what I'm proposing. I would like to get feedback from council to see if they feel comfortable. But I see Counselor Carson has his mic on. Sorry, I didn't see that.
It would be most appropriate in that violation section, either amended to the sanctions part or, we specify a fine and number in there. That's where it should go.
Okay, so do you need any direction?
Is
from council?
anyone not comfortable with that direction? Okay.
Okay, all righty, thank you. So I think Counselor Cribbs had another comment that she wanted to make.
I do, Mayor, thank you. And I didn't speak up earlier because the gentleman to my left said everything I was gonna say, so took the spotlight from me, dude. But, looking over the code of conduct, and having you mention having a fiscal made me take a second look at it. And I noticed, because for me personally, I'm going to CML next week. But I had something happen in my personal life where there was a brief moment in time where I thought I was gonna have to cancel it. And one of my very first thoughts was, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to pay back the hotel, I'm gonna have to pay back the conference itself, what do I do? And then everything re-solidified for me, so I'm fine. But it made me think, in looking over the code of conduct, and maybe because there's not the entire one in here, but I don't see any fiscal responsibility or fiscal ramifications for if we use city dollars to go somewhere and we can't make it, or we don't, we're a no-show for whatever reason. And I'm requesting that, and maybe this isn't an overnight thing, but maybe take another look and add a line in there that if we, for whatever reason, cannot make it or we don't show up for it, that we are fiscally responsible to the city to pay back the monies that they have spent on us for those workshops or trainings or conferences or things of that nature. So it's not money out of pocket wasted. And I don't know if this is the right place for it, but it made me think of it.
So as you indicated, I didn't do the entire section for this. And so if this is something council wanted us to look at, I'd look at the whole thing and see where this concept would maybe fit best type of thing. But as I'm glancing through the general conduct, I'm not seeing anything that jumps out as it relates to what you're talking about. So what I'm hearing is it's that fiscal stewardship, that it's not our money. So if something changes from a personal perspective, that you would want council members to reimburse the city and that we're just being good fiscal stewards. Is that?
That's it.
Okay.
I'm seeing responsibility, I'm seeing expectations in here, but I'm not seeing the fiscal component. And so I would feel strongly that that's included, just for my own peace of mind.
Interestingly, that very issue is addressed in the employee handbook. And it says precisely that, I think. I read it recently, but it says if you, as an employee, are booked into a conference or a seminar or something, and for personal reasons you cancel it, then you have to, if it's not a refundable registration fee and hotel fee that the city paid. You, the employee, are responsible for that. So that would be consistent with the city employee handbook. I believe, Jolene. Okay.
Well, thank you for calling me out on that, Eric.
I'm
I
not
need to
calling
read
you
my-
out. The city employee, the employee handbook isn't necessarily applicable to council, so.
But I do get a copy of it when I came on board.
I don't.
I believe,
think you
didn't I?
Did, you got a
I got
council
lots of
policy.
binders.
You got the council policy
Paul, you
manual.
gave me lots of binders. So, okay, okay.
But I guess what I'm saying is it would be very easy to just carry that same concept across into council.
And that's completely up to the rest of the council. That was just my suggestion, looking over this as a whole.
Okay, let me see if we have any feedback from any comments from any other council members. And I just want for clarification purposes, I see like on this sheet right here, it talks about grounds for excuses. Would these still apply to that, in your opinion?
Those were for absences. So
Oh, okay.
again, so page 44 was the code of conduct, and then the violations was on page 46. So there's a whole page missing in between
Oh,
type of
okay.
situation. So that was the what's excused and not excused for attendance section.
Okay. Would that be something that council have to vote on in a meeting as well, or is that something that you all would work on
Well,
and
we
present back
can,
to us?
we can draft it, but even the other items related to confidentiality, council approves the policy manual. So you'll have to vote on it. So what we can do is try to draft some language. The other thing I'm thinking is, I don't want to put it off, and so maybe we can get some of this to you, but I'm wondering if there's other sections council might want to take a look at, and if that would be a good June retreat item type of thing. Since we had the issue from the confidentiality, we can try to get that in ASAP, but then maybe have time at the June retreat to say, are there other areas council thinks we need to dust up on type of situation?
Yes, the fine and the confidentiality, I would like that done immediately. Then the rest of it, most definitely have us look into it.
Okay.
Right. Oh, Council Carson?
To Eric's, or to the point about the absences that you made, I would feel more comfortable if something like that was applied, because just, you don't ever know what's happening when you're on the way to anywhere. If you run into weather or something and you can't make it to an event, or you wreck, what happens if you get in a car accident? I'm not gonna reimburse the city if I get in a car accident going to CML. You know what I mean? I would absolutely fight that. So I would think if we're gonna do something like that, some sort of fiscal payback, we need to have these reasons for missing as well. You have to have, it can't just be blanket. So yeah, I'd feel more comfortable if that was the case there. But on the fine, I'm okay with that being immediate. This needs to be looked at, the other part.
Okay. Any other comments, anybody? Okay. Any other comments from staff? Good. All right. Okay, work session's over. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I will. Everybody, thank you.
I have a question of practice question. or
Sure.
Meeting question. Didn't we have this work session posted at 8:00?
Can we talk into the microphone? Because we still have people listening in. Thank you.
Didn't we have this work session posted at 8:00?
No, it's on the agenda as, so I sent the calendar invite for 8:00, but it should say, or as soon as like the meeting adjourns.
Oh, okay.
But
I
yeah,
was
the
looking at the
agenda is
email.
posted with the work session at the end.
Oh, okay, all right. I was just worried about that because I saw the email. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, that's it. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.